So let me just ask like a general show of hands. How many of you are familiar with the model context protocol capability? About half. How many of you have built and deployed an agentic system into production? Okay, good. It's great. It's always helpful to know where the audience is when you embark on these journeys. So I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, Joe Beta. Joe's one of the people I've worked with throughout my career, and I think of him as the crazy uncle of my current company. He's the guy who shows up in the truck and does donuts in the yard and then drives off. But he's generally a fascinating guy. He's very interesting to have conversations with. And one of the things we started talking a lot about was, he was pushing me on like, how are you thinking about agentic systems? Like, what's the definition of agentic system? And he's a really good person to kind of start to really tune and focus your thoughts on. And he said something that's stuck in my head that I've kind of come back to over and over again over the last few months, is the distinction between what he described as a hard system and a soft system, right? So I've worked in technology for several decades. I've worked on a lot of really interesting distributed systems, like Kubernetes and technologies that sort of emerged from the cloud-native computing ethos. And one of the things that has kind of re-enlivened me as a human being and as a technologist is access to AI, LLMs, generative technologies. But the thing that is really intriguing is that they are fundamentally different to anything else I've ever interacted with in my life. And one of the things that is kind of fascinating is that they are stochastic by nature, right? They tend to operate in a way that produces highly plausible, credible content that may or may not be accurate. And so I've come to think of these systems as soft systems. They are technologies that work in the world, in the landscape of probability theory. They produce, varyingly accurate information, but they're also able to perform a lot of activities that we never had analogs for historically. So it's just a fantastic moment for us. And what they tend to produce is what I think of as soft code. They produce technology that's not necessarily hardened, as opposed to the hard code, which is the technology that you are already, running your businesses with. It's technology where the code is version controlled, it's linted, it's gated, it's deployed, it's end-to-end tested, it's integration tested. And it's ultimately technology that you as a technologist are taking accountability for. And you've worked over the last several decades or however long your career has progressed to get to a point where you feel like you can take control of this technology. And now we're introducing this new thing, soft code, soft work product, which interestingly enough, you also have to take accountability for, right? Like, you're bringing these technologies into your environment, they're doing work on your behalf, they're operating in a probabilistic way, and the boundary that exists between these soft and hard code systems is not well defined, it's not well governed, and it's something that I think we really, really need to start paying attention to as technologists, because I like to think of it as like, what could possibly go wrong, right? And the thing that I think is very important to understand as you're starting to reason about the introduction of these soft systems, these agentic systems into your environment, is that you're not just bringing in a system today that you understand, like you can start to quantify the behavior of the system. These are powerful tools, they're sharp tools. They're also getting sharper and more powerful all the time, right? Like the capability of an agentic system that you've introduced and integrated using a frontier model is operating at this level. Then a new frontier model comes along, and now it's operating at this level. And the capabilities will continue to progress. And so one of the things that I think organizations are really going to have to start to think about is you're not just responsible for the work product of these systems. You're also responsible for the behavior of these systems as they're producing the work product. And as their capabilities evolve and grow, you're going to have to spend a lot more time thinking about how do I bring this into my environment in a safe way? Like, hey, just don't feed it pizza after midnight. Everything's going to be fine, right? Yeah, but we're not very good at not feeding these things pizza. Let me explain. When you think about the way that we bring an agentic system into our environment today, the default position that we tend to take is, hey, it's working on behalf of someone. So this is an agentic system. It's a coding system. I brought it in. It's working on behalf of my engineers. They are responsible for observing the behavior of the system. And at the end of the day, if it performs well, they get rewarded. If it performs badly, well, it's their responsibility. It turns out people are pretty crap at observing the behavior of a system. We're not good gatekeepers. So we have to really start thinking about, as you're building for this agentic future, like, what environment are we offering up, for these things to sit in? Like, you brought a Mogwai into your house, Gizmo, very cute. That is an entirely appropriate playpen for Gizmo. You feed it after midnight, you're going to need something that looks a little bit more like the thing on the other side of the equation here, right? Like, as you start to see these systems become more capable, you need to make sure that you've put the investments in place today, that you're not only able to benefit from today, but you're also able to future-proof the environment in which these systems are running. And so when I think about, what a responsible organization that's looking to bring agentic systems into the environment needs to do, I think they really do need to start thinking across these lines. What is a hard system? What is a soft system? What is the boundary or interface that exists between a hard system and a soft system? And what set of principles can I instantiate right now that enable me to benefit from these systems that I'm bringing into my environment, but also set me up for a future-proof world, right? And I think a logical starting point is, hey, soft code needs to be fully isolated, and it needs to run in its own environment. And it's been really fascinating to me to watch people like, hey, like the Apple Mini is now becoming a hot commodity because people want to run, these technologies in an isolated environment because they think that's going to make them safe. Like, I think they're forgetting that they're also responsible for the behavior of that system. Like, just running in an isolated environment isn't enough. But that doesn't make any sense in the data center context. Like, there are perfectly lovely isolation technologies called virtual machines. We should be thinking about those. We need to make sure that these agents run with minimal permissions. The default capabilities of a system like MCP, Model Context Protocol, was built around the idea that, hey, you have an agentic tool like Claude Code or Cursor or something, and then you want to be able to access a resource using the end user's context. That's generally a bad idea as you start to reason about kind of building more complex systems. You really want to start thinking about the de-scoping of the permission set that an agentic system operates under. You need to make sure that the identity that the agent is actually being offered is this intersection not only of the claims necessary to support the activity on behalf of the user, but also identifies it as an agent unto itself. And so you can start to reason about that from the broader world. And we do need to start really formalizing the boundary between these two worlds. Like, let's start to think about the idea of when a hard system interacts with a soft system or a soft system interacts with a hard system, we need the selectively permeable membrane that will sit between those two worlds. We need to allow value to flow in both directions so that you can get the data out of your traditional systems and actually present it in a way that one of these agentic systems can start to consume. And you can start to offer up tools in a way that makes sense for agentic systems to actually start to perform work in the real world. But by formalizing that boundary, by actually wrapping a named protocol as the principled interface, you now have something that you can reason about, you can inspect, and you can reconcile against it. You can actually start to assert policy against it to say, these are the types of actions that I want to enable an organization to be able to perform. So, long story short, I think a technology like MCP isn't perfect. I hear a lot of people saying, hey, MCP is dead. It's not dead. I just think it's hard. And at the end of the day, when you're starting to look at the value proposition associated with bringing agents into an environment to actually start to do real work, when you start to think about the future where these agents aren't just as capable as they are today, but they are gaining incremental capabilities as the frontier models supporting them improve, it is necessary to make investments that enable us to start using them in a way that's both responsible, but also sets us up for a future where we can benefit from those capabilities. And so when I look at what's holding people up today, what do I see as I work with a lot of organizations that are on this journey? Hey, identity posture is hard. MCP was built around OIDC-based flows. If you want to have something that navigates the mechanics of doing, de-scoping a token or implementing token exchanges, yes, it is hard. There's a lot of work associated with it. But it is entirely worth it if you want to be in a position where you can start to safely bring agents into your world. Hey, I hear a lot of people say things like tool pollution is a real problem. Well, yes, it is. That's why you need to start reasoning about things like semantic search and dynamically mapping tools to tasks and starting to reason about that connectivity. It's not something that just happens by itself. It's something that you as an organization need to think about and start to invest in to unlock this future. People start to talk about things like semantic coupling. It's really hard to get these tools to be reliably invoked. I need to be able to tune the tools to the task. Yes, this is an abstraction that's missing from the system that just needs to be added. And so when you start looking across the world, I do think that organizations need to hold this in their minds. Like, you have to partition the world of soft systems and hard systems. You need a formal boundary that exists between those systems. You need to be able to start asserting policy against that. But most importantly, you need to be able to operationalize it in a way that creates real value in the world. And so when I look at this journey, there's a number of technologies that I think a lot about. Hey, I think Kubernetes is a really cool technology, unsurprisingly. We built it as a platform. A lot of people are talking about, like, oh, what's the control plane for agents? Like, I'll give you a hint. It's probably going to be Kubernetes. Like, why not? It actually works pretty well. We've applied it to a lot of different areas. Hey, people have really struggled in the past to get zero trust auth working in a lot of environments. There just hasn't been that killer use case, that impetus that's already driven organizations at scale to adopt technologies like Spiffy. I think today is the day. I think this is the final impetus that is actually going to get us into a world of zero trust security, because there is no other good alternative to actually dealing with on behalf of style mechanics for agentic identity integration. So that's another technology that we can start to look at and leverage. There's micro VMs for isolation. There's a lot of great technologies built around things like libkrun that give you very hard boundaries so you can start to deploy and reason about agents and the connectors that work them. We've been working in the MCP community. Take a look at something like Toolhive as a way to bring connectivity as a first-class entity to the Kubernetes landscape. So there's a lot of great tech out there that's just looking for an opportunity to be operationalized. And if you're interested in talking about this or other topics, we'd love to hear more from you. My company is Stacklok. You can hit us up on the internet, or just hit me up on LinkedIn, and I'd love to hear more from you. Thank you.